Hello, everyone. The BMM Youth Team is ecstatic to bring you the fifth installment of the My American Journey series, where we interview American Marathi working professionals from a variety of different fields. On today's episode, we have Pooja Jesrani, a flight director at NASA, and her incredible American journey is sure to blow you away. My name is Amol Shirodkar, and I'm a sophomore engineering student at Rutgers. And Pooja, thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So right off the bat, let's talk a little bit about your high school experience. So did you know what career you wanted to pursue starting high school?
Kind of, I've always really sort of excelled in math and science. And my dad, actually, he's an orthopedic surgeon. And he, in India, you kind of take a similar SAT type test. And he ended up scoring really well, where his parents kind of pushed him into the medical field. Though I think his actual affinity was in astronomy and aerospace and that type of thing. And so he, as I was a child, kind of growing up, always gave me books about space. We'd go, we had a telescope. I watched movies about space. I had posters from different astronauts in my room. And so he kind of just fostered that love for space when I was a kid. And my mom is actually an artist. She went to art school in India, is a beautiful artist. And so it's very right brain, left brain in my house. And so though I really was good at math and science, I also really loved art. And so it was kind of this thing between like which one I should actually pick, because I could actually do art or I could do math and science. But my parents really kind of let me decide completely on my own. And I decided to do aerospace engineering. I went to the University of Texas in the end for college. But it just kind of was a path I ended up choosing, and then I actually ended up loving in the end.
That's really great. What kinds of extracurriculars did you get involved with in high school? And how was it balancing social life and extracurriculars?
Yeah, I think, balancing social life and extracurriculars in school was something that, I'm still struggling with today. Work-life balance is still a thing today. And I think that is hand in hand with the stuff that you do in high school, right? Not only are you supposed to excel in your academics, but you're also supposed to be president of all the clubs and join all the clubs and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what I do today. Even as a mother, I have to be a mother, a wife. I have to do really well at my job. I have to throw the best birthday party for my daughter. So that balance sort of never goes away. But I will say for extracurricular in high school, I was on the swim team. I swam in the morning and in the evening. I did Bharatanatyam, so I did that pretty seriously all through high school. I also was in Girl Scouts, which is actually something that people kind of give up in their younger ages, but I actually did it all the way through high school. And then I was in all like the honor societies or whatever, in high school, and the salsa club. One of the best things that I did in high school was a program called PALS, which I don't know if that's national or just a Texas thing. But it was like a peer assisting leadership program where we really did like a lot of volunteer opportunities and things like that. And that was probably my favorite extracurricular activity, because you really got to bond with the other pals in our group and really do something that impacted the community. So that was my favorite thing. But really balancing it, I mean, like I said, it's something that you do in high school and then you continue to do that the rest of your life, right? And it's kind of figuring out what works best for you.
So on the note of high school, what kinds of courses did you take? I'm talking like AP, SAT 2s, and how useful were these qualifications when it came time to apply for college?
Yeah, I think it's really the exposure, right? I think high school is really good about figuring out what you're good at. In my opinion, people that usually succeed at work, do something that they truly love. Because it's really hard to be super successful at something that you don't care to put your heart and soul in. And high school and college, especially high school, taking these AP classes really helps you figure out like if you actually like it, And I'll tell you, I did aerospace engineering, but that doesn't mean that I loved physics 2 AP. That it was a hard class. High school was hard. Those classes were not easy. And I think it's also different, right? Because a lot of it has to do with like the actual math or science behind some of the jobs. And you actually go out into the work field. Some jobs you're actually doing the calculations, right? Like that you learned in geometry, for example, or algebra 3 or whatever class. But some jobs you apply that knowledge. And though you need to know how that works and how, thermodynamics works, I'm not in the nitty gritty doing the thermodynamic calculation on a daily basis, for example. And so I think all of those classes were just helpful really just to get a feel for what the exposure was. And so I took AP math and science completely. I did that all through high school. I took the AP exams. I also took an AP exam for Spanish, Spanish literature, and that helped me get my minor in Spanish in college because I was able to get enough credits. But either way, I don't think which AP class you take and don't take necessarily defines where you end up at the end of the day.
But in general, it's just great for getting a little bit of exposure into a certain field, right?
Correct. Yep. It's just getting the exposure so that you can say, yeah, I do like this and I want to further that. And maybe I should major in that, or maybe that's where my affinity really draws me to.
So let's talk a little bit about your college experience. So I know you mentioned that you majored in aerospace engineering. So tell us about what college you went to and what inspired you to select aerospace engineering.
Yeah, so I was almost a little naive with aerospace engineering, just sounded like the right thing to do if I wanted to work in the space program. Like I said, just had a huge affinity for space, the planets, the stars, astronomy, all that. And it was like, well, if I want to do that, then I better major in aerospace engineering. I just, that was sort of my track. And I went to the University of Texas at Austin. They have a great aerospace program. It was a state school. I needed to go somewhere where local. I didn't actually apply to a lot of colleges. I just kind of applied to UT and was like, this is where I'm going to go. And I really loved it. It was such a great balance in college for me between, studying hard and then really getting to make those social connections like we just talked about. And aerospace engineering, again, I kind of picked it. And then they actually had this one class I remember. It was Aerospace Engineering 101. It was like a 1-hour credit class, sort of the lowest credit class for aerospace. And it was a weed out class. So it was taught by a person that worked at NASA. And I would say 75% of the students did poorly in the class because the test didn't actually test you on anything he actually talked about. He would just tell these fairy tales about NASA, and then the test would have like equations on it that he never taught us. And it was just like sort of like a grit class. You just trying to figure out if you were going to make it and you were going to try your best. My friend who had a 4.0 GPA leaving, actually she had 3.99 because she made a B in this one Aerospace 101 introduction class and made all A's in all of those really hard thermo classes and solids and all that stuff later on. But I think I had a lot of self-doubt when I took that class because I was it was hard. I was like struggling. I was barely making a B. And it was kind of funny because at the end of the year he was like, all right, guys, if you didn't fail out of my class, you should continue on with aerospace engineering. That means that you learned something enough in this intro class that you're going to make it. And so there's a group of us that continued on, and then a group of people that decided aerospace engineering wasn't for them.
As an engineering student, I've also had my fair share of weed out classes, so I can definitely relate with you on that.
Yep, absolutely.
So what clubs or groups were you involved with in college, and how did you manage to balance social life and extracurriculars with school?
Yeah, so I actually ended up joining a sorority. It's called Kappa Phi Gamma. It's actually a South Asian sorority. That's at UT. It was founded at UT, and I think they might even have one, a chapter at Rutgers where you go to school. But I joined that my sophomore year, and in hindsight, when people always ask me, like, what is the number one thing you learned in college, that you would recommend for college students, I honestly always say joining my sorority. So I actually was the president of my sorority my senior year, and having to sort of corral 30 girls, create, do programming, have social events. I really think that fostered a lot of my leadership skills that I actually need today in mission control. For mission control specifically, like I work on the International Space Station. So I work with, a handful of different countries in a very high stress environment. I need to have good communication skills, leadership skills. I need to be able to bring a team together. And all of those things I really learned and fostered being the president of my sorority. While I learned a lot of the academic basics through my college classes, I don't think it's that set me apart, when I was applying to be a flight director. I think it really was sort of that leadership, people skills, that really leading a sorority is what you just use that muscle. And so the sorority was a big part of my life through undergrad. I also we're in all the other organizations, like the Aerospace Honor Society or whatever, I was in all of those as well. Like many college students sign up for all of those, and I really enjoyed all of those. But I will say that sorority was probably my defining extracurricular.
That's really interesting. So if you had to pick one memory, what would your favorite college memory be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, I kind of have, like a college memory with my friends and all hanging out and, staying up late. I mean, that's always like a vivid memory of like just building those bonds because the friends that I made in college are still my best friends today. There's the people that I call when something happens. There's the people that I call when I have good news or bad news. So those friendships last a lifetime. I also have very vivid memories of sitting in the basement of my aerospace building and studying with like my best friends and like figuring out how to get through engineering together, right? Because it's not an easy major, and we kind of needed each other to like study together and do all of our homeworks together. And so I have these vivid memories of sitting in the basement, buying chips from the vending machine, drinking that Coke at 2 a.m, and figuring out how we were going to like pass the thermo test the next day. And so I think both of those together are probably my favorite college memories.
Now let's talk a little bit about your career. So could you tell us about your current profession?
Sure. So like you mentioned when you introduced me, I'm a flight director at NASA. So what that really means is I'm a flight director in mission control. And so you may have heard of some of the first flight directors, Gene Kranz, in the Apollo 13 movie. He's played by Ed Harris, wearing the vest, the infamous vest. You have, so that was Gene Kranz. You have Chris Kraft, who was like the first flight director ever. Back in the day, they would have their team names be red, white, and blue for the American flag. And so it's been going on since the late 1950s, early 1960s. And so I am the 94th flight director in NASA's history. We currently have 101 flight directors. I'm also the first South Asian female and the 15th female, which is actually not a big number considering there's been 101 now in NASA's history. And so what a flight director is a person that's in charge of mission control, right? And so, back in the Apollo era, in the shuttle era, it's the person that leads mission control. And so for me now, I am in charge of the International Space Station. So the International Space Station is this big science laboratory that goes around the Earth once every 90 minutes. We usually have at least 6 astronauts on board. Right now we have 7. Right now we have 2 Russian astronauts. I think it would be like 4 Americans and 1 European astronaut on board. We also work with the Canadian Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency. So we're pretty global, and obviously with the European Space Agency, we work with all the different countries that are part of the European Space Agency. The International Space Station has been up for over 20 years now. It was actually built, so if you're familiar with the shuttle program, it was actually built with the shuttle program. The shuttle would bring different pieces of it, and they built this big laboratory that's about the size of a 6-bedroom house. And it's the wingspan of an American football field. So that's pretty much how big it is. And so we do science, we do maintenance. I dock and undock vehicles. The SpaceX launches that have been happening recently, they've all been going to the International Space Station. And so it's fun, right? It's a big meeting of the minds, and I get to run the show. And I've been doing that since 2018 now.
Awesome. That's really, really cool. So I know that your current job is like almost directly related to your major, which was aerospace engineering, but did you ever consider a pivot in your career at any point?
I think I ended up getting really lucky. So, I always wanted to work for space. I didn't, when you do aerospace engineering, people go in all sorts of fields. You end up working at a helicopter company or a missile defense company or something like that. And for me, the bottom line was like space exploration, getting to work with astronauts. And somehow I ended up getting the opportunity to do that. And a lot of it came out of luck of getting a really great internship in college. We have this college career fairs, and the United Space Alliance, who was the biggest subcontractor of NASA at the time when I was in college, had a little career fair booth. And I walked up and I introduced myself. I gave them my resume, thinking it would just go into the ether and I'd never hear from them again. But I actually ended up meeting a manager there, and we ended up chatting quite a bit. And he actually called me for an interview. And what he said is that, hey, I have this job in mission control for the summer. It's an internship. You'll be working not for NASA directly at the time, but for a subcontractor. Would you be interested? We did the interview, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is my dream come true, to work in mission control. And little did I know, my first summer there, I actually ended up coordinating the carpet changes of mission control. So I didn't do anything technical at all. I figured out when we were going to move the wires and when the carpet was going to go in, and how they were going to change the carpet in all the different rooms of mission control, because that's been around since the 60s or even the late 50s. And so at the end of my internship, I was like, hey, I really enjoyed this opportunity. Thank you for it. However, I would really like to do something more technical. I would like to be a flight controller in mission control. I want to wear a headset. I want to be, I don't want to be changing the carpet. I want to be doing the other things. And my manager at that time was just great. He had met me at that career fair and was like, let me set you up with a few people that actually work in mission control, as flight controllers. And so I got the opportunity to interview with a few of those groups. And for my next internship, the next summer, I came back and I interned in one of those groups. So then when I graduated, I was like, oh, this is where I want to be. There were a few different flight control positions that were open at the time, and I got to pick one that was called ADCO, which is Attitude Determination Control Officer. So basically that group controls the way the International Space Station flies. So how it flies around the Earth, how it docks to shuttles, how it docks to the SpaceX vehicles, et cetera. And so I did that for 10 years. Before becoming a CAPCOM, which is the capsule communicator. So that's the person that talks to the astronauts. And so I did that for a few years, and then I was selected to be a flight director.
It's amazing how you went from head carpet coordinator to flight director. It's really amazing. What does a day in the life look for you as a flight director at NASA?
Yeah, so every day is different in mission control, right? So mission control has to be staffed 24/7, 365, because we have astronauts on board the International Space Station. And the way that we as flight directors split up the shifts is that we have 3 shifts: the day shift, the evening shift, and the night shift. And we have 25 of us in the office, and all of us split the shifts over the year. And so there's not a single day that looks the same. I mean, even the astronauts on board the International Space Station do different tasks every day. They're either, fixing their toilet or fixing their shower mechanism, versus like doing maintenance on like life support equipment and their oxygen generator, et cetera. Or they're doing science, right? They're growing plants, they're doing eye exams, so no two days are ever the same. Obviously, launch days and landing days are our favorites, because that's when we're bringing new astronauts to the International Space Station, or some of those guys get to come home, and they're our good friends, so we're happy to see them at home. And so that day is always very special, because there's a lot of nerves. People are ready to go. You're launching a vehicle, you're launching a rocket into space with our best friends on it. And it's going to get to the International Space, the fastest we can get to the International Space Station is in 180 minutes or so. So you can get there faster than you can drive to the next city in your state, potentially. And so there's just a lot of excitement on those days. And there's a lot of stuff that we need to make sure that we're doing correctly, right? Like I've mentioned a few times, these guys are our friends. I work with them. I work with the astronauts day in, day out. I know their spouses. I know their children. I know what they like to eat. And so when you're putting your best friend or a good friend, on the end of a rocket that's going to be shooting into space, you got to make sure that we have done everything possible to make their journey a success. And that really, at the end of the day, as a flight director, their safety relies on you. The call that you make, those kind of things are important. And so, yeah. So, like I said, no 2 days are the same, and it's always really interesting to see what is going to come your way that day.
That's really interesting. So, if you had to pick one thing, what would you say you like best about your job?
I like the team environment, and I think you can probably have heard that theme now throughout the interview, in terms of just getting to work with people. Like my best times in college were like studying with my friends, or hanging out with my friends, or being in the sorority. And so even now, my best part of my job is getting to work with an international team, right? I got these really smart people that work for me, that are technical and amazing, and I couldn't do my job without them. I get to work with this big international conglomerate. I get to work with the Russians, I get to work with the Europeans, the Canadians, the Japanese. I mean, it's endless international partnership. And that big team. And then when you get to actually see what's happening, you docking this vehicle, or you're undocking a vehicle, knowing that like this team did that and it was successful, and the crew came home safely, or whatever it is. I mean, it's such a badge of honor sort of to wear. And so I think definitely the team part of my job is my favorite part. for sure.
What kinds of personal traits or technical skills would serve well for your particular career?
So for technical, it's definitely sort of the attention to detail, really understanding like what we're doing, right? We do trajectory stuff quite a bit. Aerodynamic stuff is very important. And so you have to use those skills daily. And I learned a lot of the basics in college that I'm still using now. But I think more than technical, it's really the sort of EQ skill that's really prevailing these days, right? It's really more about how you lead a team. Can you get people to follow behind you as a leader? Can you have them give you recommendations so you can make a decision? I think that people skill is almost the most important, especially at my level, because I'm no longer the technical expert, right? I'm not the person that's doing the calculation, but I'm the person that's listening to the calculation, and I have to decipher if I have confidence in that person based on what they're telling me. Do they look shaky? Do they look nervous? Do they seem like this is the right answer? I have to read those body cues to make the decision on top of the technical information, obviously, that they're giving me. And so that sort of EQ piece that's the skill that we all need to be flexing, especially as you get higher up and in the management chain.
Would you choose the field of aerospace engineering again if you were starting over?
That's a good question, and I don't know. I honestly, I've absolutely loved everything that I've done, and I'm so happy for this career, and I'm so happy for being here. But there's always a part of me that has been like, oh, what happens if I was an artist or an interior decorator or fashion or something that's like completely the other side? There's a part of me that would think, what would my life have been if I had done that, right? Being a flight director is one of the best parts of my life today, absolutely. But if I were to do it again, I don't know.
Yeah, you'll never know how like your life will end up, right? If you like change like little things, butterfly flight.
Butterfly flight, exactly. If I hadn't been changing carpets, I might not have been here today. So,
So do you think a glass ceiling existed for the first generation, as in like the immigrant generation? And if yes, do you think it exists for yours as well as the first generation?
Yeah, I definitely think so. My job is a little bit different that, I get paid by the US government. And so the pay gap or glass ceiling isn't as obvious because we all get paid per a standard pay scale. So like everybody who does my job gets the same pay, and it's not different between different people. And I think at NASA, I was actually really welcome, being a South Asian, being a female, I didn't actually have a lot of the obstacles. Like I get asked that question all the time because I'm the first South Asian female. Like, tell me the story of tell me the struggle that you had. And I'll tell them honestly, like I really didn't have a struggle. I actually had a lot of cheerleaders who were saying, well, I was not as confident about if I should apply. Well, I was like, I don't know if this job is for me. Other people were telling me, no, you should do this. You would be great. Go do this. And so I've been pretty lucky in my career that I had a lot of cheerleaders that were sort of helping me and mentors. One of the biggest things that basically benefited me was getting a mentor. I kind of reached out to a colleague that was basically in a job that I kind of liked and wanted, not a flight director, but another job. And she really gave me the confidence and continued to push me. So I always recommend that folks, reach out to somebody and try to get a mentor. Sometimes it's like asking them on a date, like, will you be my mentor? Seriously? Because those mentorship relationships are kind of weird sometimes. But if you find someone that you look up to, like asking someone to be your mentor and have conversations with is always a good thing. And honestly, I think that's how I got where I am today. But yeah, I think in terms of glass ceiling, I think it's always there and it will always be there in some way, right? There's a lot of forms of discrimination. There's a lot of forms of, it can be ageism, it can be male, female, it could be anything. And the glass ceiling varies and maybe ebbs and flows between all of those. But we just need to continue pushing those boundaries, right? We as people need to continue pushing those boundaries so the glass ceiling no longer is even a conversation 20 years from now.
On the topic of finding a mentor, how do you go about finding your mentor? And could you tell me a little bit about your relationship with them?
Yeah. So like I really found a mentor by saying, will you be like walking into a colleague's office and saying, will you be my mentor? I really look up to you. I really like all the things that you're doing. I've worked with you for a few years, but I'm looking for a mentor and I didn't really actually know what a mentor was at the time, right? Like, what is a mentor really supposed to do? What is the point of a mentor? Everybody kept telling me to get a mentor. But the most important thing about a mentor is getting someone that you're able to openly talk to and can discuss, like, these are actually a problem that I'm having in my job right now. What do you recommend? Or, hey, I'm thinking about applying for this job. Do you think I should do it? Or how do I get into this field? What do you, so finding someone that you can easily talk to. Just having a mentor to have a mentor doesn't mean anything. You really need to have somebody that you connect with, kind of like a big brother, big sister relationship. And we still talk today. My mentor is no longer in aerospace. She actually no longer works anymore. She stays at home with her son, and we still talk, to this day. And I still ask her for advice, and I tell her all the time that she's the reason that I'm a flight director, because she's kind of the one that pushed me. She was my cheerleader to go apply for this job.
That's great. So how do you manage your work-life balance? And do you have any advice for going about managing work and life?
Yeah, I think there is no balance. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it's very, I think it's a constant thing that I'm trying to improve, but I don't know if I will ever honestly get there. Most people have the guilt when they're at work. They would need to be doing something else. When they're doing something else, they should rather be working. When I'm at my daughter's school, should I be at work? Or if I'm at work, I'd rather be at my daughter's performance. I mean, it's an endless battle. But I think just understanding your priorities in life, like, there are days where work comes first and I have to be there. It's a launch day, we got something going on. There are things I can't do at home. And then there are times where, like I said, where my daughter's doing a performance and she's on stage and she's doing a dance, and and my work understands that I have to be at this performance because my family and my daughter, and that is very important to me. You're able to do both, right? And so it's just about the priority, and the priority of every day changes depending on what's going on. The priority of the day changes within the day itself. 1 hour I'm doing something, the next hour I'm doing something else. And you just do your very best to manage, right? You know yourself the best. So you have to figure out your own cadence for your work-life balance. Nobody else can really help you with that, in my opinion.
Great advice. To end off, Pooja, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. Your journey was very inspirational to me, and I'm sure it was for many of the viewers at home as well. But if you could go back and tell your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't sweat about that AP class. Should I take AP Physics 2 or AP Chem 2? And and maybe it'll butterfly effect, right? And change your whole life. But in the end, you only have so much control about what you really can control. And I think in the end, really, it's hard work, grit, resilience, getting up when you fall, if you really want something, really going after something, doing what you love. Like, if you hate biology and you're an undergrad, like, change your major. Like, if you do something that you love. I feel like all successful people are doing something that they love. So don't sweat the small stuff and just follow, work hard at something, whatever it is. And if you work hard at something, you will become good at it, and you can even become the best at it. But again, if you don't love it, you won't likely become the best at it. So find something that you're really, truly passionate about and let everything else kind of fall at the side.
Thank you for that amazing advice. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Absolutely. It was so great to be here.